So, dear colleagues, we are starting in a few seconds. Please take your seats. On est aveuglé, hein? C'est pas tellement pratique. May I kindly remind those who wish to take the floor to share a copy of their remarks with the International Secretariat? Is there still room on the speakers list? So maybe yes, I have seen that we have still a place for you on the speakers list, and if you want to if you wish to take the floor, you can still sign up at the podium. I kindly ask you to do so as soon as possible in order to enable us to best manage the time for discussion. Yeah. So, dear colleagues, we continue this afternoon our discussions on the role of parliaments in reinforcing the OSCE's comprehensive model of peace and security. I have the honor to moderate this session on enhancing migration governance in the OSCE region to foster sustainable development. As chair of the Ad hoc Committee on Migration, I welcome the decision to highlight this specific topic, which has become one of the most salient political issues in most of our countries, not least during this super-election year. Migration is a multifaceted global phenomenon that presents us with considerable challenges, but also with incredible opportunities and we were talking about it yesterday during our committee meeting, for positive change. It would be a mistake to look at migration through a negative lens if it were a problem to be solved. The 2030 agenda is grounding it on exclusivity and on the pledge of leaving no one behind, dear colleagues, so that all people in all countries may benefit from development and the full realization of human rights. For the sustainable development goals to be achieved, we must consider migrants and migration. We need to see effective migration governance as a fundamental aspect of sustainable development in the OSCE region. Migrants can actively contribute to fostering sustainable development in their communities. Due to the demographic situation in Western countries, and this was an approach we were also talking about yesterday, migration is not only necessary but essential. Regular migration might offer a powerful solution to the growing shortage of skilled workers, which are faced by many of our participating states. Migrants can also help foster social cohesion and inclusivity by strengthening community relationship and diversity. Effective integration can help create more resilient communities. A significant obstacle to the integration of migrants is the use of device rhetorics. We, as parliamentarians, dear colleagues, have a key role to play in shifting the narrative and reframing it about migration and in facilitating the exchange of best practices. We have a responsibility to encourage and I underline it, fact-based policies, and to fight against prejudices and division, including against migrants. But this, dear colleagues, is not enough. To capitalize on the benefits of migration, we need a whole of society approach. We need to involve civil society and grassroots organizations and NGOs, by the way. Further, We need the involvement of local authorities who are in tune with local concerns and needs of migrants and their communities. Crucially, we also need to involve migrants and their host community with a particular focus on women and young people. They are vulnerable contributions that people with lived experience can offer to policymakers, and we must ensure that their voices are heard in decisions that directly affect them. These are some of the key issues on which the ad hoc committee, as I already mentioned, is focused on. 2 weeks ago, we have been in Morocco to learn more about their migration policy, and I'm very happy to have the delegation of Morocco in the room. You are highly welcomed. Morocco, by the way, occupies a unique strategic position at the heart of the migration flows between Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, making it a country of immigration, transit, and increasingly a destination country. It is also the only country in the MENA region which has sought to enact significant migration and asylum reforms since 2013. I was struck by Morocco's positive approach to international mobility, and this is a term we should use more than we did in the past. During our visit, we learned more about initiatives to address brain drain and to boost circular migration. Our key takeaway from the visit is that we need to reframe the migration issue, adopting a positive approach that emphasizes the contributions and opportunities of international mobility. This is essential for encouraging constructive discussions about migration. We also need to intensify international cooperation and efforts to address the root causes of flight more intensively, dear colleagues. It is crucial that we continue to work closely with OSCE participating states as well as partners for cooperation to learn lessons and exchange best practices, with the goal of improving migration governance and fully realizing opportunities for positive change. I hope that our discussions today will help us focus on how we can draw upon the positive benefits of migration to fuel sustainable development in the OSCE region and beyond. I am pleased that we are joined by two eminent speakers who are well placed to lead and contribute to our discussions, dear colleagues. They will each have 7 minutes for their keynote remarks. Allow me first to introduce Dr. Sarah Leonard de Namur. Dr. Leonard holds a Jean Monnet Chair on Migration, Security and Intelligence in the European Union at Dublin City University. And she is also the co-director of the Dublin City University Conflict Institute, as well as a professor of international security at the University of South Wales. She has published extensively on European security cooperation, with a particular focus on asylum, migration, and borders, as well as policing and counter-terrorism, a very interesting aspect as well. Dr. Leonard holds a PhD in international politics from the University of Wales, Aberystwyth, it's hard to pronounce, Master of Arts in Russian and Eurasian Studies from the University of Leeds, as well as an MA in European Studies and a BA in Politics, with its link to international relations as well, and from the Université Catholique de Louvain. So, Dr. Leonard, we look forward to your remarks, and you have the floor. So please take it.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, dear members of the Parliamentary Assembly. It's a great honor and privilege to speak to you today, so thank you for the kind invitation to participate in this important debate. According to the International Organization for Migration, more than 1,000 people have died or gone missing in the central Mediterranean Sea since the start of this year. The central Mediterranean is the deadliest known migration route in the world. The Missing Migrants Project, which is an initiative implemented since 2014 by the International Organization for Migration to document death and disappearances of people in the process of migration towards an international destination, has recorded 30,396 deaths and disappearances in the Mediterranean region since 2014. Why is that so? Well, there are many reasons for which people choose, more or less, to migrate. And I'm saying choose more or less because such an important decision is often the result of significant push factors. First, many people are still facing conflict and war. According to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data non-governmental organization, 1 in 7 people are estimated to have been exposed to conflict to date in 2024. There has been a 15% increase in political violence incidents recorded in the past 12-month period, whilst 50 countries are currently categorized as experiencing extreme, high, or turbulent levels of conflict. Second, climate change and natural disasters are increasingly important drivers for migration, as people find that the area where they have traditionally resided has become simply unlivable. Higher temperatures can threaten agricultural livelihoods. The rise of sea levels poses a severe threat to coastal life around the world, with possible consequences such as increased intensity of storm surges, flooding, and damage to coastal areas and beyond. Desertification can foster conflict, notably over water access. All of these developments can lead to migration, as people need to seek safer homes and a new sustainable way of life. According to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, between 2008 and 2006, more than 20 million people annually were forcibly displaced by weather-related events, including extreme temperature, storms, wildfires, and floods. The Institute for Economics and Peace forecasts that more than 1 billion people could be displaced globally by 2050 due to climate change and natural disasters. The next problem is that there is a lack of safe ways for migrants and asylum seekers to reach Europe. Violence and pushbacks at the European borders are now being routinely reported. And many migrants feel that they have no choice but to resort to the services, and I'm putting that between inverted commas, of smuggling groups, which, for example, if they operate on a maritime route, are using increasingly small and unsafe boats to avoid detection. And that is largely why so many people die on their way to Europe. And even if they do not die, many will have had to undertake long, perilous, costly, and traumatic journeys. The fact that so many people are still willing to take such risks, which are by now well known, is evidence of the desperation of these men and women. They cannot see any other way forward. They know that they might die or be severely injured on that journey. They know that their own children, spouse, or other relatives who accompany them on the journey might die, and still they keep attempting to reach Europe. And this should make us pause for reflection. In many ways, this lack of safe routes for migrants and asylum seekers is puzzling. First, when it comes to migration, European countries have a long tradition of being part of migration flows, either as countries of emigration or countries of immigration. It is important to recall that there was mass European immigration to the Americas, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand in the 19th and 20th centuries. Between 1850 and 1913, more than 40 million people emigrated from Europe to the New World. This was the result of demographic transition, as well as wars and political changes on the continent. Closer to us, migrant workers made a key contribution to the period of economic growth that characterized many West European countries after the Second World War, as local workers could not fill all vacancies. Second, Europe has a long tradition of promoting human rights. European countries played a key role in the adoption of the 1951 Refugee Convention. So how do the concerning reports on the use of violence and pushbacks at European borders nowadays relate to this heritage and tradition? And third, this lack of safe routes into Europe is all the more surprising since many European countries are already facing demographic decline or would be in decline without immigration. Many European countries are facing a significant demographic challenge. Their population is aging, whilst health and pension systems come under growing pressure. Migrants help fill labor shortages in many countries. Migrants play a key role in some economic sectors, such as hospitality, construction, healthcare, and domestic work. The so-called key workers or essential workers, as they came to be known during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thus, it is important to rethink migration governance in Europe. It is also crucial that whilst seeking to control and manage their borders, European states fully uphold human rights. This is of utmost importance for the migrants and asylum seekers concerned, but also for the standing of European countries on the international stage. As just discussed, although it gives rise to some challenges, migration is a great opportunity for European societies. And this should be more widely acknowledged, and I very much welcome the discussions this afternoon as an important step in that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Leonard. We will now hear from our second speaker, Mr. Amar Taha. Mr. Taha has over 25 years of professional experience with the United Nations and the international organizations, NGOs, and private sector as well. He has been serving as a senior regional liaison and policy advisor at the IOM's Regional Office for Europe in Vienna since 2018, I said it correctly now, providing strategic guidance to IOM missions and engaging with state and non-state actors in shaping evidence-based migration governance. Additionally, he supports the implementation of the Global Pact for Migration, and we are going to talk about this as well, and to advance the sustainable development as they align to national priorities. Prior to this, Mr. Taha headed IOM's mission to Egypt, where he contributed to establishing a state-led migration dialogue processes between AU, the European Union, and Africa. He has also co-authored several publications related to peace-building initiatives and the impact that specific livelihood projects have on developing countries and countries in transition. Mr. Taha, I look forward to hearing your insights on the necessary components of sustainable migration policies and how we as parliamentarians can best contribute to ensuring that migration policies in the OSCE region contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, also in countries of origin. So please, Mr. Taha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to start by thanking the Government of Ireland and the Irish delegation for the invitation and for the flawless organization of this event. It's been truly magnificent so far. Thank you very much. And of course, thank you, Chair, Dr. De Rijder, for the invitation and for the opportunity also to speak at yesterday's event on sustainable returns as well as part of the ad hoc committee on migration. And of course, I'm very, very delighted to be here today to have the opportunity to discuss the vital intersection between migration and development, something we have been focusing on quite a lot at IOM in the recent past. Of course, I also want to echo Dr. De Rijder's opening remarks, where migration should not be seen exclusively from a negative angle, a security lens, and certainly should be seen also from a developmental lens, and how can that be leveraged to contribute to sustainable developments in countries of origin, transit, and countries of destination. And that will be the focus of my intervention today. So how does migration contribute to sustainable development and beyond? Let me share with you some facts and some figures which I hope can be of interest, particularly with a focus on the OSCE region. I start by one fact on that roughly, according to the UN DESA statistics, the latest data shows that roughly 101 million of the world's 169 million migrant workers, that's roughly 60%, live in countries within the Europe and Central Asia region. Now, notably, the largest number of migrant workers were in Northern, Southern, and Western Europe, where migrant workers constituted roughly 20% of the labor force. This was also mentioned by Dr. Leonard as well. So another statistic, another fact on migration that contributes to sustainable development is that we know, according to the World Bank, that 1% increase in immigration can boost GDP in destination countries by 2%. This, again, is a clear demonstration of how migration directly contributes to economic growth. Linked to that, eliminating global mobility restrictions could increase global GDP by more than 12%. This, again, is another indication of the significant untapped economic potential migrants can bring if we were to allow for freer mobility of persons. Migrants roughly are around 3.5, 3.6% of the global population. There has been an increase in the number of people on the move. Indeed, we see 281 million, but this is, again, very much in line with the population growth of the world as well. So while the number of international migrants has grown, so has the population, and the average and the proportion still is the same, around 3.5, 3.6% of the global population. Another interesting fact that links between the link between migration and development is that migrants, contrary to what we often hear in the media, unfortunately, migrants tend to contribute more in taxes and social contributions than they receive in benefits. A recent study that was commissioned by the government of Switzerland shows that having immigration into Switzerland would significantly impact and potentially bankrupt the social security system as early as 2027. And this comes from a study commissioned by the government of Switzerland. There are many studies, of course, commissioned by several governments here today that also show the concrete benefits of migrants to economic development and social cohesion, as also underlined by Dr. De Rijder. By the end of 2023, the Europe and Central Asia region has received approximately $243 billion in remittances and sent out an additional $220 billion abroad to their countries of origin, according to the World Bank. These remittances far outnumber overseas development assistance, in some countries by 3 times, and in many countries also is more than the combination of foreign direct investment and overseas development assistance together. So that again shows another untapped potential of the remittances in countries of destination, but also, of course, in countries of origin. We also see an increase in remittances in the low and middle income countries, again increase, which again is a sign of how migration contributes to development in countries of origin, even in the lower and middle income countries as well. These benefits are, of course, not automatic, they're not quick wins and do not happen in a vacuum. The relationship between migration and development is complex, context-specific, and requires a comprehensive approach. The impact also of the linkage between migration and sustainable development was also mentioned in the recent report by Mario Draghi, in which it also suggests that migration is necessary and an essential to boost economic growth in the European region. Rooted in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration, or the GCM, provides us with a cooperative framework on all relevant actors to unlock the potential of migration and migrants for positive and sustainable development outcomes. The Compact, as many of you will be familiar, was drafted by the member states, and it was adopted in 2018 and through a UN General Assembly resolution. It offers a 360-degree view on migration with 10 cross-cutting guiding principles, some of which were underlined by Dr. De Ridder, which include age-sensitive, gender-responsive, and always respectful of national sovereignty. It is non-binding, and it has 23 objectives covering all dimensions of international migration. Just to read one of the opening statements of the Global Compact on Migration, which again was drafted by member states, it says, "Migration has been part of the human experience throughout history, and we, the UN member states, recognize that it is a source of prosperity, innovation, and sustainable development in our globalized world, and that these positive impacts can be optimized by improving migration governance. Migration has emerged as a global strategic asset driving human development worldwide." Paradoxically, however, in recent years, migration has become increasingly complex and more contentious. Countries in the OSCE region are among those most affected by population decline, as we heard in the opening remarks, and particularly as demand for labor rises. Conversely, the narrative on migration is not where we would like to see it. At the heels of the UN General Assembly, also the UN Secretary General remarked at the Summit of the Future, which took place only a few days ago, that the United Nations is here to bring multilateralism back from the brink. And our world is heading off the rails, and we need tough decisions to get back on track. The UN Secretary General further emphasized that the 21st century requires 21st century solutions. We need frameworks, such as this one, that are networked and inclusive, and this platform is an example of that. He also added that the Pact of the Future is about troubleshooting sustainable development goals and securing peaceful and livable future for everyone on our planet. And as mentioned also in the opening remarks by the Dr. Chair, migration is recognized as a precursor, contributor, and accelerator for sustainable development. Now, how can we work together, and how can we can leverage the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE to support us in our efforts? Let me share some very concrete examples. Conscious of time, I'll be very brief. Build legal and institutional groundwork for evidence-based policies to counter misinformation. We hear this time and again. The need to address misinformation is key. So what we can request, or what we would wish to see, is to push for legislation that supports migrant research, data collection, data sharing, both within and across borders, to inform evidence-based policy making. Use these platforms to share facts and figures with your constituencies, reinforcing data-driven narratives in the public discourse. Strengthen media literacy through example education curricula, public awareness campaigns, and the regulation of digital platforms. A great example of this is here in Ireland, and it's called the Global Migration Media Academy. It is a global coalition of migration experts, academics, media professionals, offering free courses to support balanced and accurate coverage on migration. We also wish to see promote policy coherence. So this also is something that the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly can also do. Migration is intrinsically cross-border and cross-sectorial, affecting and being affected by all areas, such as health, education, and justice. You are very well positioned to bridge the gap between international commitments and national legislation, ensuring alignment with both international and regional frameworks. Strengthen partnerships. Also, Dr. De Ridder mentioned this in her opening remarks. Advocate for stronger partnerships at the local, regional, and international levels, including with non-governmental stakeholders such as the private sector, and foster inclusive dialogue. IOM stands ready to support you in all these efforts and look forward to strengthening our partnership in all the OSCE participating states, where we enjoy offices in all across. IOM's regional office in Europe and Central Asia covers the 56 countries and territories, closely mirroring OSCE's participating states. At IOM, we recognize that partnership and regional platforms such as this one are key to advancing our shared values and our shared objectives. We remain committed to working closely with you, with the OSCE participating states, international organizations, academia, migrants, and of course the parliamentarians as key members, also through the UN Network on Migration. Thank you very much, and apologies for taking a little bit more than what I should have taken. Thank you.
It was so interesting. Thank you, Mr. Taha, for your precious information, and I'm always convinced that we should take this political decision based on evidence, and I'm very grateful that you underlined this specific topic, because populist debates take place all the times in most of the countries that are member in our organization. And thank you also for highlighting that there's so much misinformation, and I think we should come back to evidence-based and research about migration as well, to have, as you already said, a positive approach to this issue. But now, dear colleagues, it's up to you. I now look forward to hearing from you. We already have a long list of speakers and of names on my list, but we can accommodate a few more. So each speaker, dear colleagues, will have 3 minutes for their remarks. And I will look on my speakers list. The first on my list is Kyriakos Haidiani from Cyprus, followed by Mr. Kemal Aydin from Turkey. So, dear Kyriakos, please take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The issue of migration has been on the Assembly's agenda for more than 10 years. For so many years, the Assembly has been concerned with the issue of non-violation of the rights of migrants. It is fact that the situation with the rights violation is became worse because of the massive exploitation through networks. Today we have a well-organized industry who is earning billions of euros for hungry people. From the other side, the states spend a big amount of money for managing the flows of migrants. The states do not secure anymore the internal security. The political systems in the OSCE region are under pressure, and in many countries the anti-migrants movements win the elections. As a result, is a destabilization of democracy. A new danger is in force. I am asking if the strategy to accept millions of migrants in our countries to achieve increase of our GDPs is a good strategy, or it will put us in a dangerous situation. Our responsibility for the international sustainable development must remain on supporting the poor countries through the external financial aid. Cyprus is facing disproportionate migratory pressures, and because of that, it has exceeded by far its limits in terms of infrastructure and services. In fact, the Republic of Cyprus ranks first among EU member states in numbers of asylum applicants in comparison to its population, thus straining the country's competent services, resources, and infrastructure. The instrumentalization of migrants through the occupied areas, increasing waves of Lebanese and Syrians reach Cyprus by sea through Lebanon due to the escalation of the war in the Middle East. It is precisely for this reason that it is important to strengthen joint efforts to address the challenges posed by irregular migration. Irregular migration, trafficking of persons, and instrumentalization cannot be accepted, and the Syrian case should be regularly reassessed with a view to exploring a suitable approach that includes more effective ways of dealing with the situation, always in accordance with the international law. In this context, I welcome the recently adopted Pact on Migration and Asylum. Certainly, the pact is a step forward, albeit it does not provide for mandatory relocations and places additional burdens on the countries of first reception like Cyprus, Greece, Italy, and Spain. To this end, I have the strong opinion that the EU needs to rethink its approach to its relations with migrant countries of origins in order to tackle the problem of migration. A more comprehensive approach towards third countries that would include more opportunities for legal migration and has access to the EU market, investment, and technical assistance in return for good cooperation in the area of returns. It will be a step in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kyriakos. The next speaker on my list is Kamil Aydin from Turkey, followed by Artur Gerasimov from Ukraine. So, Kamil, please take the floor.
Dear Madam Chair, the reader, and distinguished colleagues, migration has long shaped the course of our region's history, presenting both challenges and opportunities. As we gather today, the need for enhanced migration governance is more pressing than ever, especially in the face of global crises, conflicts, and socioeconomic disparities. Effective migration governance is not only a matter of humanitarian duty, but also a critical component of fostering sustainable development across the OSCE region. Turkey, situated at the crossroads of continents, has always been a bridge between cultures, peoples, and regions. As the largest host of refugees globally, particularly from Syria, Turkey has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to providing shelter, education, and healthcare to millions of displaced persons. Our government has integrated innovative policies which facilitates access to vital services and ensures the dignity of refugees. However, we must also recognize that unmanaged migration flows can create security risks. In this context, Turkey firmly believes that enhancing migration governance must go hand in hand with efforts to counter terrorism and organized crime. Terrorist groups such as Daesh and the PKK have exploited vulnerable migrant communities for recruitment and radicalization. To combat this, Turkey has been a leader in border security, intelligence sharing, and de-radicalization programs, all while respecting international human rights standards. We call on our OSCE partners to collaborate on strengthening legal pathways for migration, investing in integration policies, and enhancing coordination between migration governance and counterterrorism measures. Together, we can build a future where migration contributes to sustainable development, peace, and security in our region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kamil. The next speaker on my list will be Artur Gerasimov from Ukraine, followed by Artemi Ralov from Spain. So, dear Artur, please take the floor.
Thank you very much. Dear Madam Chair, dear colleagues, first of all, I need to say that Ukraine is, as nobody maybe in this room, excluding a few countries, knows what does it mean refugees and IDPs. Because at the moment we have more than 6 million refugees. Out of them, almost 4.5 million refugees are in Europe. We have more than 5 million IDPs inside the country. And this is the hugest waves which were created by Russian aggression. We're speaking about how extremism and terrorism are creating these waves of migration. But in case of Ukraine, we have the highest level of this, because this is not just terrorism, this is state terrorists who started and provoked illegal invasion and who caused these waves. Before starting my short speech, I want to say thank you for all countries, for all people of the countries who really hosting our refugees. Thank you very much, especially for Germany, Poland, and Czech Republic, where there are the biggest number of our women, children, and our citizens. Also, I want to say thank you for all countries for your behavior, especially in the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Because we remember how big wave was. And I still remember how our Eastern European countries, our colleagues, our neighbors, opened the barriers, their states for Ukrainian women and children, allowing them to go, sometimes even without the documents, because our refugees were living their homes under shellings and in many times within the minutes. But what I want to stress your attention, now I told about it during the Standing Committee. I understand that a lot of countries are tired by this aggression. I understand that. But I want to say you one very important thing related to this particular session. In case now the help to Ukraine will be stopped or will be even decreased, you can imagine that Russia will start to have bigger level of success on the battlefield. But immediately this will cause additional waves of migration, the additional waves of refugees from Ukraine. Because in case you are under shellings, in case your children can't go to the school, in case you can't even go to the shop to buy food because of constant shellings, you have only one way to move: inside the country to become an IDP, or outside the country becoming a refugee. That's why also please carefully think about support of Ukraine now from this angle as well. This is very important. And next point. At the moment also, I know that there are a lot of discussions in different countries about Ukrainian refugees and support of Ukrainian refugees. Some kind of countries are decreasing this support, some of countries discussing it. Please, don't do that until the spring. Because at the moment, Russia on purpose is destroying our energy infrastructure, civilian energy infrastructure. And the task of Russia to have our Ukrainian women and children without electricity and heating during the winter. We expect an extremely difficult winter. Please continue support of our women and children at least till spring. Let us to come this winter. And the last, I told it during Standing Committee and I want to repeat. We kindly ask you to keep unity. We kindly ask you to keep your energy like you showed in 2022, 2023. And please, be fair with Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Artur. And you can be sure that we keep in solidarity with Ukraine. This is one of the main reasons why we are here today, and thank you to focusing on the situation of the refugees coming from Ukraine. Be sure you have our solidarity. Next speaker on the list is Artemi Rallo from Spain, followed by Attila Tilki from Hungary. Please, Artemi, the floor is yours.
Gracias, Presidenta. Queridos colegas, tomo la palabra para pedir a esta Asamblea que siga apoyando el trabajo del Comité de Migraciones, apoyando a su presidenta, Daniela de Rieder, y a todos los miembros por su trabajo, por su compromiso y por su sensibilidad. Valores necesarios para afrontar uno de los mayores dramas del mundo actual, la huida de millones de personas de la guerra, del hambre, de la injusticia, de las dictaduras, del integrismo religioso y de las desigualdades económicas y sociales. Millones de personas que solo buscan una vida mejor para ellos y sus familias, progreso personal y paz. Personas que no eligieron dónde nacer ni están condenadas al hambre, la miseria y la injusticia. Hace 2 semanas, queridos colegas, el Comité de Migraciones visitó Marruecos y pudo comprobar el duro, esforzado y meritorio trabajo de Marruecos gestionando la migración. Un esfuerzo que Europa debe reconocer y agradecer. España, desde luego, lo hace. 15 kilómetros separan España y Marruecos. 15 kilómetros separan Europa y África. Es la frontera que ofrece la mayor desigualdad social y económica del mundo. No existe frontera en el mundo con más diferencias entre el mundo rico y el mundo en desarrollo. Pero ninguna frontera impedirá nunca que un ser humano luche por conquistar una vida mejor. Y además, paradójicamente, Europa necesita recibir a esas personas para mantener su progreso y su prosperidad. Por eso debemos rechazar, lamentar y repudiar las ideologías que abogan por el odio hacia el emigrante, el populismo xenófobo y racista, que no es el futuro, sino el peor pasado que ha conocido la humanidad. Queridos colegas, en 2023, 37.000 personas migrantes llegaron a Canarias por mar en pequeños botes desde la costa africana subsahariana. En 2024 ya son casi 30.000 y se estima que en los primeros 5 meses de este año 2024, entre enero y mayo, más de 5.000 personas nunca llegaron a Canarias y murieron perdidos en el océano. La humanidad no puede ser indiferente ante este drama. Hay que responder con decencia, empatía y solidaridad. Nada más. Gracias.
Thank you, Artemi, mainly for your kind words. This gives me the opportunity to thank once again the Moroccan delegation that hosted us for our visit that we have made 2 weeks ago. So thank you, dear colleagues from Morocco. It was a pleasure to be in your country. So next speaker on my list will be Attila Tilki from Hungary. He will be followed by Madame Pierrette Ranget du Canada. Attila,
Yes,
the floor,
thank you.
Yeah, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you for the floor. Dear colleagues, Hungary is currently holding the EU presidency this year. Among Hungary's 7 presidency objectives and priority areas, one of the most important is the external dimension of migration. Within this priority, the Hungarian presidency places special emphasis on the fight against illegal migration. To address the migration pressure that has affected Europe for years, effective tools must be used. During the presidency, special attention will be given to cooperation with relevant third countries based on mutual benefits, increasing the effectiveness of return processes. In addition, we provide space for dialogue on development of innovative solutions for managing asylum and migration in third countries. In our work, we strive to focus comprehensively and balancedly on all migration routes and movements affecting Europe. Reducing illegal migration and curbing migrant smuggling requires closer cooperation with countries bordering the EU, as well as the key origin and transit countries. Last year launched the dialogue and the Global Alliance Against Human Smuggling was an important step in this direction. A key priority for Hungary is the Western Balkan region, along with the closely connected countries located on the primary Eastern Mediterranean migration route, including Turkey and the countries on the Silk Road region, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Hungary will closely monitor of the implementation of comprehensive agreements with partner countries, including Tunisia and Egypt, as well as the migration partnership with Mauritania. Given the increasing crisis situation on the Africa continent, as well as the growing social, economic, and political instability in the region, which will lead to massive migration waves, posing significant challenges to European security, Hungary considers Chad, Mauritania, and Sudan due to its geopolitical location and priorities. And at least I would like to say two sentences to my Ukrainian colleague. I live close to Ukrainian border, and I felt sorry that he maybe forgot mentioned Hungary, and I would like to say to him and to you, of course, more than 1.4 million people came as refugees from Ukraine across Hungary. I live close to the border, so I worked a lot for the Ukrainian refugees when the war broke out. I would like if the next time my Ukrainian colleagues won't forget mention Hungarian helping. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Attila, for reminding this. I think your support to host all these Ukrainian refugees is very precious, and we know that, and we thank you for this. So the next speaker on my list is Madame Pierrette Ranguet du Canada, followed by Mr. Kemal Çelik from Turkey. Please, Pierrette Ranguet, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I would like to highlight the importance of devoting a session of our parliamentary conference to migration governance. In recent years, mass population displacement and growing needs for resettling migrants led to the OSCE community to reflect on the OECD role in migration governance. This role must be seen in the broader context of global responses to migration and refugee flows. The OECD, as a regional arrangement under the Charter of the United Nations, drawing on its comprehensive expertise, is well positioned to support the implementation of global instruments and standards. Evolving immigration issues have challenged our commitments to the OECD principle, particularly in relation to cooperation and dialogue on migration, the protection of human rights, and the promotion of tolerance and non-discrimination. The OECD, its institutions, and structures continue to play a key role in fulfilling these commitments. It is vital, I repeat, it is vital to our Parliamentary Assembly's support of the OECD in this week. Migration is a transnational issue that requires global cooperation. The political, economic, and social impacts of mass population displacement are being felt throughout the OECD region and pose major risks to regional and global stability. However, it bears mentioning that the OECD participating states have widely different views and experiences regarding the immediate impact of migration in their communities. For example, Canada saw unprecedented levels of population growth driven by immigration. In 2023, Canada's population grew by 1.2 million, a historic first. Nearly 98% of this growth was due to permanent and temporary migration. Diversity, acceptance, and understanding are part of our national identity, and supporting migration is an intrinsic aspect of Canada's social fabric. Canada is continuing to discuss best practices and lessons learned from other countries in various international forums. In closing, I wish to remind the Assembly that the OECD has always promoted a collaborative approach to migration management, whether relating to labor migration, involuntary migration, and refugee migration. Colleagues, thank you for your attention.
Merci, Pierrette. Next speaker on my list is Kemal Çelik from Turkey. He will be followed by Zvonimir Truscott from Croatia. Please,
Sayın Başkan,
Kemal.
değerli meslektaşlarım, göç yönetimini tartışırken göçün kısa vadeli bir mesele değil, yenilikçi ve işbirliğine dayalı çözümler gerektiren kalıcı bir zorluk olduğunu kabul etmeliyiz.
Esteemed Chair De Ridder, valuable colleagues and participants, when discussing migration governance, we must recognize that migration is not a short-term issue, but a permanent challenge that requires innovative and collaborative solutions.
Biliyorsunuz ki Türkiye özellikle dünyanın en büyük mülteci nüfusuna ev sahipliği yapmaktadır. Büyük göç akımlarını yönetme konusunda uzun yıllara dayanan deneyimiyle hem göçmenlerin haklarını koruyan hem de toplumun daha geniş refahına katkıda bulunan politikalar uygulamaktadır. Bu kapsamlı yaklaşımımız insani sorumluluğu ve sürdürülebilir kalkınmayı stratejik bir odaklanma ile birleştirmektedir.
As you know, Turkey especially hosts the world's largest refugee population. With its many years of experience in managing large migration flows, it implements policies that both protect the rights of immigrants and contribute to the wider well-being of the society. Our comprehensive approach combines humanitarian responsibility and sustainable development with a strategic focus.
AGİTPA üyesi devletleri farklı göç sorunlarına cevap verebilecek, uyarlanabilir ve kapsayıcı yasal çerçeveleri benimsemeye teşvik etmeliyiz. Göçmenler sadece yardım alan kişiler değil, ekonomik kalkınmaya katkıda bulunan kişiler olarak görülmelidir. Bu tür programların AGİTPA bölgesinde yaygınlaşmasına yönelik ortak bir çaba, göçmenleri ev sahibi ekonomilere katkıda bulunmalar için güçlendirecektir.
We should encourage OSCE PA member states to adopt adaptable and inclusive legal frameworks that can respond to different migration challenges. Immigrants should be seen as contributors to economic development, not just recipients of aid. A concerted effort to expand such programs across the OSCE PA region will empower migrants to contribute to host economies.
Ayrıca göç yönetişiminde güvenlik tedbirleri ile birlikte insani değerlere de öncelik verilmelidir. Ülkeler arasındaki bilgi ve veri paylaşımı da bu bakımdan çok önem taşımaktadır.
Additional human values should be given priority along with security measures in migration governance. Sharing information and data between countries is also important in that regard.
Türkiye göçmenlerin terör şebekeleri ve suç gruplarının istismarından korunmasını sağlarken sınırlarını korumak için de önemli tedbirler almıştır.
Turkey has taken important measures to protect its borders while ensuring the protection of immigrants from exploitation by terrorist networks and criminal groups.
Uluslararası insan kaçakçılığı ile mücadele, göç yönetiminde en önemli unsurdur. Bu bakımdan ülke parlamentoları insan kaçakçıları ve organizatörlere caydırıcı ceza konusunda ortak görüş ve eylem birliğine varmalıdır.
Fighting international human trafficking is the most important element in migration management. In that regard, country parliaments should reach a common opinion and unity of action on deterrent punishment for human traffickers and organizers.
Sadece acil ihtiyaçlara cevap vermekle kalmayıp aynı zamanda sürdürülebilir kalkınma için ortak yollar yaratan göç politikalarını geliştirme zorunluluğu apaçık ortadadır. Teşekkür ederim.
It is clear that we must develop migration policies that not only respond to urgent needs, but also create common pathways for sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Kemal Çelik. And this gives me also the opportunity to thank you that you have hosted one of our visits in Turkey this year. So the next speaker is Vladimir Truskot from Croatia, and he will be followed by Ellen Samin from Belgium. Dear Vladimir, the floor is yours.
Dear Madam Chair, esteemed colleagues, first and foremost, it's always a pleasure to take the floor after Dr. De Ridder. Today I stand before you to address the urgent and multifaceted issue of migration, particularly from the perspective of Croatia. And this speech does not have inciting intentions, as Croatia has already demonstrated its sympathetic heart towards those in need, notably the Bosniaks during the Homeland War and Ukrainians during the Russian aggression. Croatia was once considered as one of the safest countries globally by the Global Perception Index. The US State Department granted Croatia the highest safety level for travel, and this global safety perception became a key driver of our economic growth. However, this security, one of our greatest national assets, is now under threat. However, we must confront the challenges posed by illegal migration. Recent events in Croatia have raised serious concerns. In one alarming case, a migrant broke into a home and assaulted a young lady. We have seen examples of convicted migrants committing heinous crimes, such as a murder in a tram. There have also been recent distressing reports of migrants sexually assaulting underage girls in one of our coastal cities. These incidents are not isolated. Similar, and if not worse, trends are observable in various European capitals. Many countries are now reconsidering their border policies, raising questions about the integrity of the Schengen zone. This raises a crucial point. Empathy, kindness, and generosity should never be mistaken for naivety. The foundational policy of the European Union must prioritize the national security of our citizens. It is only on this secure foundation that we can build additional policies aimed at improving the lives of our people. Each day, this security, one of Europe's greatest assets, becomes increasingly compromised. Furthermore, and very important, it is essential to distinguish between legal and illegal migrants. Those who enter our country legally should always be welcomed with open arms. However, we must ensure that our borders are secure and that illegal migration is properly addressed to protect our communities. In conclusion, while Croatia remains committed to humanitarian values, we must also prioritize the safety and well-being of our citizens. The time has come to advocate for a balanced approach to migration that respects both our obligation to our citizens and also our citizens' rights to live in safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zvonimir. Next speaker is Ellen Samin from Belgium. She will be followed by Karina Reiter from Austria. Ellen, the floor is yours.
Dear Madam Chair, dear Excellencies, dear colleagues, a topic that closes to my heart is Artsakh, is Nagorno-Karabakh. And given the current geopolitical instability elsewhere, this issue has unjustly faded into the background. On September 19, it was exactly 1 year since Azerbaijan launched its final offensive. After the so-called ceasefire of 2020, Azerbaijan repeatedly violated the agreement. culminating in the brazen events of September 19, 2023, when an entire people ceased to exist. 120,000 residents of Artsakh were driven from their homeland. The question, and I must pose it here, is whether the OSCE too could not have done more for the Christian Armenian population in Artsakh. I'm not saying there were at that time no mediation efforts by the OSCE. On the Armenian side, there was a clear call for mediation, but from the Azerbaijani side, there was no dialogue, let alone a compromise possible that would guarantee the rights and identity of the people in Nagorno-Karabakh. After the ethnic cleansing in Artsakh, all Armenian and Christian traces are now being erased by the Azeris. Yet nothing is being done at the international level to protect the Christian Armenian heritage. Protecting historical and cultural heritage worldwide is supposed to be the responsibility of the international community, particularly UNESCO. However, to date, there has been no independent expert mission. Here too, the OSCE could have played a mediating role. In this conflict, the international community chose the easy way out. Artsakh and Armenia have nothing to offer. They have no natural resources, no oil, no gas. Economically speaking, Artsakh holds no value for the West. But in the end, this is also a geopolitical and moral issue. Dear colleagues, I conclude. I hope that both OSCE and the international community will not remain blind to what Azerbaijan is capable of. It was in a debate this morning, and some colleagues already mentioned it. On November 11th, the UN Climate Conference will take place in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. At the very least, this is a wrong signal, especially given that former leaders of the Republic of Artsakh, of whom Ruben Vardanyan is perhaps the most internationally known, are still being held captive. It is time to allow them to return home. Thank you.
Bedankt, Ellen. Next speaker on my list is Carina Reiter from Austria. She will be followed by Boris Dietrich from the Netherlands. Carina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The topic of migration governance is more present than ever. Therefore, it is of high importance that we discuss it and work on viable and realistic solutions. The topic of migration has a significant impact on our societies and countries. As an example, if we look at elections across Europe, and most recently my home country, Austria, as we had elections on Sunday, we should focus on why people vote the way they vote. We have to take people's concerns seriously, and one of the issues is people do not feel like politicians are listening to them and their concerns. And therefore, it is crucial to work together on viable solutions, because we must work on it together to cover all the aspects that need to be addressed. That means a balance between border protection, combating irregular migration, and promoting legal migration pathways. Many issues have an impact on migration flows. I think the topics of today's session were chosen very well, because you cannot talk about migration governance without talking about climate change. And we need a holistic approach that sees eye to eye with all stakeholders. In session 2 about climate change, Mr. Pont said we have the tools, we have the diagnosis, and the same applies in my eyes when it comes to migration governance. We need a security-oriented but also pragmatic approach to migration management. Our goal should be to control migration, combat irregular migration, and at the same time enable legal migration in an orderly manner. To achieve this solution, we must all work together, and this necessitates a realistic approach along with the willingness to listen and be attentive, and I think this forum is a very good start to that.
Thank you, Carina. The next one is Boris Dietrich from the Netherlands. He will be followed by Irina Gerashenko from Ukraine. Boris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniela de Ridder. Dear colleagues, the previous government in my country, the Netherlands, collapsed because the coalition partners could not find a compromise on migration issues. And during the election campaign that followed, migration issues were the dominant topic. Facts and data didn't play an important role. Fear-mongering and distortion of the truth and populistic views were adamant. A new government with a radical right-wing party in the lead started a few months ago. And I see the same phenomenon in several other European countries, and I mentioned Germany, Austria, Belgium, France. So this is a problem. During the OSCE's July 2024 meeting in Bucharest, we adopted a comprehensive resolution on strengthening safe and regular pathways for migration. And the key elements, and we've heard it also today, also in your introduction, Madam Chair, recognize the diversity of causes of flight and forced migration, such as war, discrimination, natural disasters, climate change. And causes of migration include socio-economic drivers in countries of origin, in particular poverty, unemployment, and a lack of economic opportunities. And there are pull factors in receiving countries, such as labor opportunities. What we need is a holistic approach towards migration, and we need to acknowledge that labor migration is something which governments can regulate by making sharp choices of what kind of sectors of the labor market need migrant workers. And a rights-based approach is needed. Companies should be made responsible for fair housing and living conditions for migrant workers. As for asylum migration, the honest answer, I believe, is that in spite of agreements with third countries, with border protection and with policies to return rejected asylum seekers, there will always be an element of unpredictability. Unfortunately, in the Netherlands, the new government and its plans are to cut billions of funding for development assistance in third countries. It doesn't want to regulate labor migration in a sustainable way. And political fantasies, not based on facts and data, are still paramount. The new slogan in the Netherlands is "The Netherlands First." And therefore, and I conclude, I call on you, Daniela de Ridder, and on the OSCE PA to put pressure on the Dutch government, as well on those governments that do not take the Bucharest resolution seriously. And I would like to mention that outside pressure really works, while we in Parliament, of course, will do our part in the national parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Boris. It's so helpful that you mentioned the resolution that we have applied to in Bucharest. And I think we will put this topic very high on the agenda of the Migration Committee. Be sure. Thank you so much. Next speaker will be Irena Gerashenko from Ukraine, and she will be followed by Jelena Nedovic from Montenegro. Irena, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you for this very important discussion. Russia's war in Ukraine has forced nearly 10 million people to fly their home. 6.5 million Ukrainians are refugees abroad, mostly women and children. We are grateful to all the countries that have accepted refugees. Nearly 4 million more are internally displaced, having closed their homes due to daily bombing and occupation. After security, the demographic crisis is a key challenge for Ukraine. Ukraine has become the country with the highest mortality rate in the world and the lowest birth rate. The mortality rate in Ukraine is currently 18 per 1,000 people, and the birth rate is 6 per 1,000. This is a demographic catastrophe. Russia has educated over 20,000 children from Ukraine. There is also a risk of detaining for another 1 million children remaining in temporary occupied territories. For forcibly displaced and deported children, personal information is altered so that their relatives cannot find and return them. By 2051, Ukraine's population could shrink to 25 million. Daily bombing across all Ukrainian cities have destroyed 70% of our critical infrastructure. Launch power outage, even in Kyiv, have become the norm. We are facing a harsh winter. Power outage may trigger a new view of migration. It is a precedent that Ukraine will be without electricity for at least 5 hours every day during the winter. Putin is provocated new crisis, migration, and betting on fighting with Ukraine. Millions of Ukrainians want to return home. Key factors are security, housing, electricity supply, and employment. All these challenges require a collective response, and there is only one solution: to strengthen military support for Ukraine so that we can defend our sovereignty. Ukraine must also work more actively with refugees, ensure they remain connected to Ukrainian culture. Children attending school abroad must have access to Ukrainian literature and not further the languages. A significant issue is separated families. I am convinced that the Ukrainian Parliament must also pay greater attention to demographic problems. And all country, our delegation have meeting with Ukrainian hostages, and today our delegation have meeting in Dublin with Ukrainian people who now live in Dublin. And thank you very much to the country, all country who now take support Ukrainian women and children. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina, and I would like to assure you that we will continue to stand by your side in solidarity. Next speaker will be Jelena Nedovic from Montenegro, and she will be followed by Özgül Saki from Turkey. Jelena, please take the floor.
Thank you, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues. It's a great pleasure to address you today on the topic that is important, not only for the prosperity and stability of the OSCE region, but also the future of our planet, migration management, and its connection to the sustainable development. Migration, when properly managed, can serve as a driver for economic growth, innovation, and cultural exchange. However, challenges persist, and it's crucial that we work together to create politics that foster integration, protect the rights of migrants, first of all, human rights, and promote the overall well-being of both the migrants and the receiving communities. For Montenegro, a small country located in the heart of the Balkans, migration has had profound impact on our economy, culture, and social life. And I need to say that Montenegro received the most Ukraine refugees in relation to the number of the inhabitants that we have in Montenegro. Many of our citizens have searched better opportunities abroad, while we have also welcomed migrants from the other regions, most recently migrants from the Ukraine, how I already said. Successful migration management is not just about providing entry to the migrants, but also about ensuring they have the tools to integrate and thrive. Montenegro has been working to improve access to the education, healthcare, and social services for the migrants, recognizing that their well-being is a cornerstone for contributing to the sustainable development of our country. As a member of the OSCE, Montenegro has embraced refugees with open arms, providing them with not just support, but friendly and compassionate environment. This movement of the people has been both a challenge and opportunity, which we approach with the mindset of inclusivity and solidarity. And when we speak about human rights and the EU, that means solidarity, and that's what we need in those days. And also, I'm finishing with that, Montenegro stands ready to contribute to OSCE efforts to enhance migration management, not only within our borders, but across the region. And I need to say, together we can ensure that migration is a force for good, benefiting individuals and societies alike, supporting the goals of inclusivity, sensible and development for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jelena, also for all the efforts done by your country. Next speaker will be Özgül Saki from Turkey. She will be followed by Natalia Pipa from Ukraine. Özgül, please take the floor.
Thanks, dear Chair. When we look at the EU's migration policies, we see that the European civilization is rapidly moving away from human rights, ignoring the 1951 Refugee Convention and addressing migration with purely security logic, not humanity. For example, the readmission agreement signed between EU and Turkey is a blow to the universal migration and asylum system. Thus, a major breach has been made in the Geneva Convention on Refugees. Although readmission agreement must be cancelled, EU states have gone even further, and now similar agreements are on the agenda between Italy and Albania, Germany, and some African countries. The United Kingdom has also introduced Rwanda plan. Let's turn to Turkey. There are approximately 5 million migrants with legal right to stay in Turkey. 3.5 million of them are Syrians, under temporary protection for almost 12 years. They don't have freedom of travel, which is the most basic human right. They cannot go to European countries. And now, according to readmission agreement, the European signatory countries' payment per migrant to countries like Turkey, where migrants are sheltering in inhuman conditions, or more precisely, merely surviving, is less than the expected profit that the migrant is expected to bring to Europe. To put it bluntly, the migrant has no chance. The migrant has no chance to even dream of setting foot in Europe. EU's new migration and asylum pact, while banning refugees from Europe, the plan seeks to fill the employment gap with temporary contract migrant workers. This means that as a mobilizing force, migrant workers are seen as disposable laborers. And now, finally, we say that all the responsibility shared all together. What we need is the establishment of a fair, equal migration, sharing, and asylum regime based on universal law. Of course, above all, the most fundamental things that needs to be done is to put an end to the wars that cause mass migration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Özgül. I have been informed that there has been a small change. So next speaker on my list will not be Natalia Pipa, but Pavlo Frolov from Ukraine. He will be followed by Dora Duro from Hungary. Pavlo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear colleagues. Today we are talking about migration. Due to Russia's war of aggression, millions of Ukrainians have become forced migrants, both internal and external. There is official data that there are 4.6 million IDPs in Ukraine. However, many did not register themselves and did not take an IDP certificate. According to UNHCR, more than 6 million Ukrainians fled the war abroad. That is, more than 10 million of our citizens were forced to leave their homes. They have suffered and continue to suffer. Moreover, do many of them have a home to return to? The biggest problem after the ongoing hostilities is the destruction of residential infrastructure by the aggressor. According to the World Bank, the European Commission and the UN, as of the end of 2023, 3.5 million Ukrainians have lost their homes. 90 million square meters of housing were destroyed. We need almost 10 years for new construction of them at pre-war rates. This year, the shelling and bombing of peaceful Ukrainian cities continue almost every day, so this figure is unfortunately much higher now. Some European countries are starting to pay to Ukrainian refugees for their return to Ukraine. Ukraine welcomes this. Nevertheless, we have a huge problem: how to quickly restore the housing destroyed by Russia. Unfortunately, Ukraine cannot do it alone, so we are counting on the support of the OSCE member states. We have initiated an all-Ukrainian inventory for all real estate, both state-owned and municipally owned, and with the consent of the owner, also private property, to solve the housing problem of Ukrainians who have lost their homes. Both completed and potential housing objects, unfinished building, land plots, will be mapped on an on-lab map with public access. IDPs and other affected Ukrainians will be able to apply for accommodation and see the technical description and even photos of each building. Government agencies and city councils will be able to quickly and openly show the demand for bringing the facilities into a reliable condition and attract investment and funds from humanitarian organizations. With this database and map, we want to demonstrate to the world that Ukraine has used all its internal resources and created transparent, effective, and accountable mechanism for the post-war reconstruction of housing. It is important that all international humanitarian organizations also open up their housing solution so that we can scale up the most effective ones. The implementation of this ambitious project requires financial support, so I urge you, dear members of parliament, to join the solution to the largest migration crisis in Ukraine, support Ukrainians to help us protect the basic rights of the victims of Russian aggressor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pavlo. Next speaker is Dora Duro from Hungary, and she will be followed by Rupa Haq from United Kingdom. And we now all listen to Dora, who has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, dear colleagues. One of the greatest challenges facing Europe is the issue of depopulation and its consequences. On our continent, the number of the indigenous inhabitants is in constant decline. Despite the fact that we live on one of the richest continents in the world, there are not enough children being born anywhere to maintain or increase the population. The globalists say that in Europe, we must replace the children who are not born with migrants. But by doing so, we are losing our national identity and marginalizing our own culture, not to mention the social tensions that we are already seeing in countries that rely on immigration. This is not the path the vast majority of Hungarian people want to take. We believe that supporting families Protecting our homeland and our culture is the way to go in the 21st century. But we cannot imagine opposing immigration without finding solutions to the challenges of depopulation. This is the true meaning of sustainability. Unfortunately, the situation is difficult as the family is under increasing ideological attack from LGBTQ propaganda to the hair-raising theory of conscious childlessness. All of this in itself has a destructive effect. My political community, our homeland movement, opposes all of these harmful ideologies. It fights against illegal migration. It promotes zero tolerance in this matter. Above all, it does everything to help Hungarian families. So we say that Hungary belongs to the Hungarians. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next speaker is Rupa Hack from United Kingdom. She will be followed by Christian Klink from Germany. Rupa, it's up to you.
Friends, colleagues, comrades, enhancing migration to foster economic development is surely a self-evidently good thing. But in this turbulent year of wars and also of elections in nearly half the countries on this planet's surface, these concepts have become deeply contested. In the UK, the then, now former government's main slogan was "Stop the boats." In the United States, Trump too employs similar exclusionary rhetoric. Maybe Ireland, where we are now, is a success story on these kind of matters. So if you take a walk down this very waterfront, you can't move for financial giants which contribute to the national Irish economy. And not only these PwCs and Citibanks, but the very conference centre that we're in, the hotels we're staying in are serviced by a workforce from all over, exemplifying enhancing migration to foster sustainable development. And just a few doors away, a few doors down from here, is a museum of migration, fittingly for a country with a population of some, 5 million inside, and a wider diaspora of some 70 million Irish elsewhere. And this museum boasts that there's not a tin whistle or leprechaun in sight. And those diaspora, of course, number Joe Biden and Oasis. Also serving as global gateway too are the streets round here and all over our entire vast OSCE region. I remember as a teenager reading in Pop Mag's Smash Hits an interview with the left-wing singer Billy Bragg, who said, "Of course I favour migration. Imagine if there was none. Everyone would have to eat English food and everything would close at 5:30. Indeed, the immigrant capacity for hard work and diversification of retail and high street offer is exemplified by my own late father, an Indian restaurateur from Bangladesh, or Apu from the Simpsons. In the UK, we've experienced, thank God, political change in this year of elections. But the first 100 days plan for Labour, my party, was rudely interrupted this summer when racists tried to burn down a mosque near Liverpool, fueled by hatred and misinformation that spread on social media like wildfire. Hearteningly, the wave of copycat race riots were put a stop to when there were counter-protests, so the violence ended. In conclusion, managing migration will not always be easy or indeed popular, but we must never let hatred win. I'm optimistic. If there is one niggle, I'd just say, in line with all current opinion polls, I just wish my country had never left the EU. Alas, to reopen that vexed question would take way longer than the 3 minutes that I have just exceeded allows. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rupa. Not only for your optimistical approach, but also for your sense of humor and for the recommendation to go to the epic. I think everybody should go there, and I gave the same recommendation yesterday, because we not only learn something about migration, but about our hosts And this gives me, thanks to you, the opportunity to thank our host, the Irish delegation, that they so warmly welcomed us here. Thank you so much. Next speaker is Christian Klink from Germany. He will be followed by Mr. Jan Mahnik from Slovenia, and I apologize if I pronounced his name not correctly. I will do my best. But now it's up to Christian Klink.
Right. Dear colleagues, thank you so much all for this so far very good debate. It's a great honor to address you all. May I start with pointing out to the esteemed colleague Duraduro that without migrants in Ireland, the whole conference couldn't even have started. But let's get back to the main topic here. We all know that migration is much more than refugee migration. However, I would like to point out a few things and address both sides of the political aisle. As you all have noticed, Germany is moving its migration policy somewhat. It's moving towards a more balanced position, and you probably all have noticed that we have implemented measures for a reduction in the number of asylum seekers. I would like to point out to the more progressive members of this assembly that these measures have some justification. I strongly believe that in the discussion about migration, we must not ignore the pleas of social workers that housing increasingly becomes a problem, the pleas of health workers and educators who are often migrants themselves, that they are working at the limit of their capacity, and the complaints of police officers that individuals are breaking the rules. Dear colleagues, I'm convinced it would be not progressive, would not be left to ignore or disqualify those reports. I think it would be unwise. I believe those voices need to be heard. However, dear colleagues, there is also something I would like to point out to the more conservative members of the Assembly. We should not stop at calling for a better migration governance. We should also work on the intellectual and moral groundwork for such governance, because without it, it's a hollow question. And this leads to a very, very difficult question to answer. It's an easy question to ask. It's a difficult question to answer. To which people are we willing to give refugee status, and to which people we do not want to give the refugee status? It's a very, very difficult question. Today I don't have an answer for it, but it underlines that migration governance is in its core a deeply humanitarian issue. Any effort towards better migration governance needs to keep this perspective in mind. And I am convinced, personally, that a better regulation can contribute to a system that is also more humanitarian. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank my fellow members of the Ad Hoc Committee on Migration and its chair, Daniela de Ridder, but this should just be the start. We all should make good use of all opportunities the OSCE PA has to offer to exchange our ideas about this topic, and I call on the PA's leadership to support such a discussion as much as possible. And I believe that if the more progressive and the more conservative parts of the Assembly combine their respective perspectives, they combine their respective strengths, we can make very good contributions in this subject. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christian, also for your kind words. Now the next speaker is Jan Mahnik from Slovenia, and he will be followed by Dimitros Markopoulos from Greece. Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, dear colleagues. Europe's one of the main problems is illegal migration. The issue of illegal migration is becoming more and more urgent as we are facing a massive influx of illegal migrants, bringing with them lots of challenges and also threats to our national security. If this continues at the rate we have seen over the last 10 years, European identity and culture will be seriously threatened in the next decades. Illegal migrants will not integrate, let alone assimilate, because they want to assert their way of life from which they have supposedly, because of the dangers, fled. And we are therefore witnessing cultural divisions that are fueling social tensions and conflicts. We must do everything to preserve our identity and the values that have been the foundation of Christian Europe. Most of illegal migrants do not come to Europe for work, but to enjoy the fruits of our labor and to exploit the welfare state. This means increased costs for the health and social system. Simply put out, our labor market cannot sustain a constant influx of people who do not contribute proportionately to our economy. Anyone who wants to come to Europe to work can apply for a visa and come legally. The most important issue, however, is the question of security. Uncontrolled illegal migration brings crime and terrorism to Europe. We are witnessing many cases of violence and radicalization. We must be aware that the European way of life is not a human right, and therefore we must not neglect the interests of our own citizens because some politicians and NGOs are out of touch with the reality and have misconceptions about multiculturalism in Europe. But there is a solution. Poland has shown us that in recent months, as has also Italy. Therefore, the solution for migrants is quite simple. Externalization of asylum, securing Europe's borders with manpower and technical barriers, save lives of migrants with banning the entry of ships carrying illegal migrants into European ports and send the message that the Mediterranean route is closed, strictly rejecting and returning all those who enter Europe illegally, reform of the social system, and last but not least, prosecuting all those involved in illegal migration, including politicians. It is time to put the security, stability, and prosperity of Europeans on the first place. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Jan. The next speaker is Dimitros Markopoulos from Greece. He will be followed by Mrs. Sara Conti from San Marino. Dimitros, please take the floor.
Madam President, dear colleagues, it is more than clear that Europe faces a total different period of challenges in the field of migration governance. And I'd like to underline the word new, or better, the phrase total different, because of the sudden change of two factors. The first is the incomprehensible and unilateral decision of the German government to follow the strategy of closed borders. It is hard for all of us to believe that a social democratic government with Greens together and Liberals, who for years blamed European right or center-right for less harsh proposals, follows such a policy. And apparently, when Germany copies the Hungarian example, something certainly goes wrong. Therefore, this change of migration policy should be explained and justified to all of us, and I speak about the German government. This was also the reason for my proposal yesterday to our committee to visit Berlin. We need someone to give an explanation. The second factor for sudden change is what is happening to the Middle East. Lebanon is the new theater of war with incalculable consequences for neighbor countries such as Cyprus, Turkey, and my country, Greece. Concluding, I insist that with surprises from the one state to the other, without European unity, and without a clear, specific European plan, we will feel for one more time social, political vibrations to our continent, new pressure from far right, a big crisis which will move European Union's political system to a stalemate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dimitros. Next speaker is Sara Conti from San Marino. She will be followed by Jean-Luc Ador from Switzerland. Sara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniela. Distinti colleghi, una delle sfide più complesse dei paesi del mondo sviluppato è innegabilmente il continuo calo del tasso di natalità, che porta ad un invecchiamento della popolazione e di conseguenza ad una diminuzione della forza lavoro. E credo che parte della risposta a questo problema potrebbe risiedere proprio nel fenomeno migratorio. E vorrei tranquillizzare la collega ungherese che quello che sto suggerendo non è rimpiazzare i bambini non nati con i migranti, ma piuttosto valutare il fenomeno migratorio nella sua complessità senza steccati ideologici. Infatti, i migranti spesso portano anche benefici alle comunità nelle quali vengono accolti, dando un impulso positivo al mondo del lavoro agli investimenti e alla diversità culturale. Inoltre, se ben integrati, possono giocare un ruolo strategico nel migliorare le condizioni delle proprie comunità nei paesi di origine, attraverso il trasferimento di nuove competenze e di risorse economiche. Tutto questo però non può accadere e può avere anche effetti negativi se i fenomeni migratori non sono ben gestiti. In questo caso non solo molte vite umane sono messe a rischio, cosa che come europei non possiamo e non dobbiamo tollerare, ma le stesse comunità vedrebbero così negata la possibilità di trasformare questo fenomeno in uno strumento di sviluppo e di sostenibilità. Ecco perché l'inclusione e l'integrazione sono il punto chiave. Il modo in cui gli immigrati possono contribuire allo sviluppo delle comunità ospitanti e a quelle di origine è dunque direttamente proporzionale alla possibilità che essi hanno di accedere ai servizi, di potersi integrare nelle nuove comunità e allo stesso tempo di rimanere connessi con quelle di origine. Per questo i nostri paesi non dovrebbero impiegare le proprie risorse nell'ostacolare la migrazione, ma piuttosto dovrebbero creare le condizioni per far sì che il fenomeno migratorio possa verificarsi entro canali sicuri e di legalità, così da agire come catalizzatore di sviluppo. In questo senso la cooperazione tra gli Stati della regione dell'OSCE gioca un ruolo fondamentale. Ogni Stato dovrebbe fare la sua parte per trasformare la migrazione in parte della soluzione, invece che renderla parte del problema. Lasciatemi concludere, distinti colleghi, raccontando con orgoglio quello che nel corso degli anni il mio piccolo Stato ha fatto in questo senso. San Marino, infatti, un microstato di 61 km quadrati, non potrà certamente giocare un ruolo cruciale in questa partita, ma non si è mai tirato indietro quando è stato chiamato ad accogliere persone vulnerabili. È così che durante la Seconda Guerra Mondiale decine di migliaia di italiani che fuggivano ai bombardamenti trovarono rifugio all'interno delle mura di San Marino. E dall'inizio della guerra russo-ucraina, 400 ucraini in fuga dalla guerra sono stati accolti con permessi di soggiorno speciali. In ultimo, ma non per importanza, con la legge 79 del 2021 il Parlamento sammarinese ha approvato all'unanimità una norma per permettere ai singoli e alle famiglie sammarinesi di accogliere e chiedere in affidamento minori stranieri non accompagnati che rimangono soli nei campi profughi e nei centri di accoglienza europei, dando così loro un futuro di speranza e di crescita in un luogo sicuro. Grazie.
Thank you, Sarah, also for this clarification. Thank you. So the next speaker is Jean-Luc Ador from Switzerland. He will be followed, and he will be the last one on our speakers list. He will be followed by Radoslav Fogiel from Poland. Jean-Luc, the floor is yours.
Merci, Madame la Vice-Présidente. Chers collègues, en introduction à ce débat, nous avons entendu des experts qui, tous les deux, nous ont livré un discours purement unilatéral et idéologique fondé sur un dogme. L'immigration devrait être considérée envers et contre tout comme un phénomène positif et plus encore, je cite, comme une fantastique opportunité. Ça, c'est peut-être ce qu'on pense dans les ONG qui vivent de la migration et des migrants, dans certaines universités ou encore dans les cercles mondialistes. C'est peut-être ce qu'écrivent les auteurs, je serais curieux de savoir qui c'est d'ailleurs, d'un rapport suisse dont je n'ai jamais entendu parler avant aujourd'hui. Mais les citoyens de nos pays, qu'en pensent-ils? Eh bien, c'est clair, quand on leur donne la parole dans des élections ou, comme en Suisse, dans des votations populaires, ils sont de plus en plus nombreux. Ceux qui pensent que nous devons mieux contrôler l'immigration et pour cela nos frontières. Ces gens, on ne peut pas indéfiniment leur cacher des problèmes qu'ils voient, qu'ils vivent tous les jours. Montée de l'insécurité dans nos rues, des agressions contre les femmes, identité et cohésion sociale menacées, marché du travail et assurance sociale sous pression, sans parler de la surpopulation dont la cause unique, nous le savons, n'est pas une natalité en baisse, mais bien l'immigration, avec pour conséquence une pression toujours croissante sur nos infrastructures, sur notre territoire, sur nos ressources. C'est là qu'on voit au passage que la maîtrise de l'immigration, c'est peut-être la première des écologies, la première clé d'un développement vraiment durable. Dans ce sens, je ne vous cache pas que lorsque, dans l'agenda 2023 dont il a été question tout à l'heure, je vois un objectif qui parle de, je cite, « faciliter la migration et la mobilité de façon ordonnée » ou encore de planifier la migration, je me dis que nous allons droit dans le mur. Voilà pourquoi, en Suisse, mon parti combat résolument le pacte mondial sur les migrations. Le message que j'aimerais faire passer ici aujourd'hui, moi aussi, c'est donc que si nous voulons un développement vraiment durable, nous avons besoin qu'il soit compris et accepté par nos populations. Et pour ça, nous devons écouter et même entendre, pas seulement des experts, mais nos concitoyens, à commencer par ceux qui souffrent tous les jours des effets collatéraux de l'immigration. Et plutôt que de tout miser sur le grand remplacement par l'immigration, repeupler la vieille Europe en mettant en place une vraie politique nataliste.
Merci Jean-Luc. Nos experts auront certainement, après que nous avons écouté tous les intervenants, la possibilité de clarifier de quel rapport il s'agit. Soyez assurés qu'ils vont répondre à cette question. Merci. Next speaker on the list, and we have one more, is Radoslav Fogiel from Poland, and there's some more. David Stockmüller from Austria will be the last one. So, Radoslav, please take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, migration crisis affects many of our countries in many different ways, and one of those ways, in my opinion, particularly visible recently, is the problem of weaponization of migration. The movement of migrants orchestrated by Putin's and Lukashenko's regime of Russia and Belarus with the help of human traffickers who created an artificial migrant stream at not only Polish but also our Baltic friends' borders. It is an example how migration can be weaponized for political ends. And this is a tactic that endangers lives, our lives, but also migrants' lives, and destabilizes our communities, creating a humanitarian crisis that affects us all. This weaponization of migration is not just a regional concern, but a global threat. We must condemn this and find such practice. We cannot allow that the vulnerabilities of individuals who are actually seeking a better life are exploited for political gain or authoritarian gain in this case. We need to strengthen our cooperation with countries of origin and countries of transfer, and we should focus on providing development aid so we can address the root causes of migration. Supporting local communities, enhancing educational opportunities, creating prosperity will not only improve lives of people who stay there, but will also reduce the pressures that drive individuals to seek refuge somewhere else. In order to fight it, we need to remember of these facts and work together to address the real issues, the real roots of the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Radoslav. The last speaker on the list is David Stockmüller from Austria. David,
yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, liebe Frau Vorsitzende. Ich werde es jetzt auf Deutsch machen, weil ich das ganz kurz auch doch emotional bin. Ich würde nämlich gerne meiner Kollegin aus Ungarn widersprechen und auch hier aufs Tunlichste widerrufen. Ich muss das ganz offen sagen. Die Kollegin aus Ungarn hat eben von LGBTQ-Propaganda als destruktive Kraft und und die Gefahr für das Familienbild gesprochen. Ich finde, das soll in diesem Haus definitiv nicht Common Sense sein, es soll nicht als normal gelten, wenn man so etwas ausspricht. Ich halte das für einen unverzeihlichen Ausrutscher, der sofort und auch offiziell zurückgezogen gehört. Wir kennen den Human Rights Record von Orban und seiner Partei in Ungarn. Wir wissen, wie es dort zugeht, wie dort Menschen es geht, die gerade dieser Minderheit angehört. Dieser fragwürdige Diskurs mag vielleicht in Ungarn akzeptabel sein, aber wir sind hier Mitglieder einer internationalen Organisation mit einem ganz klaren Bekenntnis zu Menschenrechten und Rechtsstaatlichkeit, wo Menschenrechte hochgehalten werden, wo Menschenrechte gewahrt werden und ausgebaut werden sollen. Dass Ungarn hier einen Schritt zurück macht, ist bedenklich. Und es ist nicht nur Ungarn, es ist genauso in Georgien heute etwas passiert, unterschrieben worden. Das soll uns zu denken geben. Und finde, sollen diese Kommentare hier nichts verloren haben, sollte man auch der Frau Kollegin sagen. Jeder und jeden in der OSZE-Region sollte freistehen zu leben und zu lieben, wenn man will, egal ob es illiberalen Kräfte passen oder nicht. Sie spricht von Ungarn für die Ungarn. Ich will in einer Welt leben, wo Rechte für alle gelten, auch für Schwule und Lesben, und diese nicht als politischen Spielball von menschenverachtender Politik missbraucht wird. Wir lassen uns die Werte der offenen, liberalen Demokratie nicht von illiberalen Kräften absprechen, und ich fordere auch wirklich hier Respekt gegenüber allen Menschen ein, auch gegenüber den Minderheiten, die in dieser OSZE-Region auch leben, und bitte die auch entsprechend zu wahren und nicht zurückzubauen. Vielen Dank.
Vielen Dank, lieber David. Ich will dir gerne, was ich sonst nicht tue, auf Deutsch antworten. Aber ich will noch einmal deutlich machen, dass in der Tat die Migrationskommission, die ich leite, ein Ziel hat, nämlich die Menschenrechte zu respektieren. Und deshalb will ich sehr wohl deinen Punkt auch unterstützen, dass es auch darum geht, Menschen, oder das Thema LGBTQI+ zu respektieren. Ich glaube, das ist ganz wichtig. Wenn wir, und du hast gesagt, wenn es darum geht, dass Menschen leben und lieben sollen, wie und wen sie wollen, dann ist das auch ein Punkt, den wir zu respektieren haben. Was sollten wir als Organisation, die gerade für den Frieden eintritt, gegen Liebe haben? Vielen Dank, lieber David, für diese Einlassung. So, dear colleagues, dear experts, thank you for all these very interesting points and your interventions. But dear experts, dear Amar, Taha, dear Leonard, you have certainly noticed that not everyone, not every speaker on our list agreed with the approach that migration has a positive impact. But you know, I want to hear from your side, how could we increase, or how could we convince them that migration is really needed when we look on our demographic change, for instance, or when we even if we are looking on our security issues. For me, let me make this comment by asking you what you think about. Security issues have at least 3 approaches. It's about internal security. It's about security led by foreign policies. We heard it mainly because the Ukrainian colleagues addressed the aggressive war of Russia against Ukraine. But there is the third dimension as well. So in my view, we have to talk about social security. And yes, people are worried about their own future, because maybe in times of crisis, and we had to face so many of them. We had economic crisis, for instance, in Greece. We had COVID to overcome, and we have the war, the aggressive Russian war against Ukraine. So this is also a crisis affecting not only Ukraine and the neighborhood, but all countries in the world. So I understand that security issues are troubling all the people in the member countries of the OSCE. But how should we deal, and how can we, and how can you, dear Amr, dear Sarah, convince those who are not convinced yet that there should be a positive approach to migration. So maybe, Amr, you were the second to make your presentation. You are now the first to try and answer.
Thank you very much. And thanks to all the distinguished delegates and speakers for their interventions, which are clearly from one extreme to the other, from the interventions of San Marino to the ones of other countries, without naming others, without naming specific countries. But some of the interventions could not have said it better than what I have said. I mean, again, there are, of course, and I've said this in my opening remarks, is that when not managed properly and unmanaged and irregular migration is definitely strains, has an important strain on society, but can we, do we want to see a world without migration, with less migration, and as we've heard many times, replacement of our children? I'm not sure if we're talking about replacement. No one's ever mentioned replacement. I don't think the numbers that we're talking about even suggest replacement. We do know for a fact that the evidence shows, and not by my organization alone, but the World Bank, which many members here are members of, countries are members of, and contribute to, and support, and respect. World Bank, OECD, and others suggest that proper integration of migrants, the proper inclusion of migrants into societies far, far overstrip the costs that member states spend on the social system. And the evidence is overwhelming. We've heard that, you know, of incidents, security incidents, as Dr. Leonard was mentioning. There are security, you know, some of the interventions suggested that migrants commit crimes. Yes, they do. Migrants do commit crimes. They are not angels. Do all migrants commit crimes? Do the overwhelming majority of migrants commit crimes? I think if there was evidence to suggest anything close to that, we wouldn't even be discussing that topic today. We would be discussing a completely different topic. The weaponization of migration, securitization of migration, is something I was hoping would not be the priority or the main discussion of today, but rather how to leverage migration for sustainable development. And I look around the room and I'm just remember the initial free mobility within Europe with the Benelux countries that then developed into Schengen and seized the freedom of movement of capital, of goods and services, and of persons. There is also the issue of identity that's been mentioned time and again, and again, I'm looking at the European Union or the EU just as one example. Not many countries have a lot in common, in the sense that there possibly could be more in common between Middle East, North African countries with Mediterranean countries than some European countries amongst European countries. Yet we don't see, much of a challenge or an issue in moving between Northern Europe, Southern Europe, Eastern and Western Europe. Diversity is good. We have seen the consequences of diversity. We have seen the consequences of breaking down borders. We have seen that the economic growth, wealth, that diversity brings, economic trade brings within a union such as that of the European Union. We also see that, of course, the countries that, paradoxically, in many ways, the countries that are opposing migration the most are the ones that are actually receiving more migration today. I'm not sure I should be underscoring that too much, because then, I wonder where we want to go. But we see more migration in countries that have left the EU. We've seen more migration into the countries that are actually opposing migration vocally. And the evidence is there, and one of the members, or a couple of the members actually, were of the speakers today, mentioned also the reports and the international organizations and the United Nations and the NGOs and the civil societies. But we should be listening to the people. I think we should be listening to the people for sure, but we also should be listening to the facts. We should also be listening to the academics. Otherwise, what's the purpose of the academics and the institutions that actually provide the evidence? On the reports, of course, I'm more than happy to share the reports. I've shared a number of them already at the entrance of this room. So I invite you to please refer to those. But certainly on the study, particularly of Switzerland, on which I was called on, more than happy to immediately share that with the Swiss delegate immediately as I step off the podium. So I think that there's an overwhelming evidence, and there's overwhelming proof, and in terms of literature and of facts, that migration is a prerequisite to sustainable development. And with this, maybe I close and I give the floor back to the chair. But I want to say that what is the alternative to maintaining our current economic stability and economic growth with a declining population? What do we do? So maybe if there is an alternative to migration, then I'm happy to discuss that as well. But unfortunately, whether we put walls, and we've seen walls being put up, I'm not sure that will stop people from coming. I don't think there is evidence to suggest that the more walls we build, the more restrictive we make migration, the less migration happens. Again, otherwise we would have done that already. And the amount of money that is spent on securitization is, we have again evidence to suggest that, is far better spent in promoting regular pathways, because promoting regular pathways promotes regular migration, addresses the labor market needs that are required by the countries of destination, and at the same time remittances support the development, as again there is plenty of evidence to suggest the increasing amount of remittances which contribute to the development in countries of origin. And only development reduces fertility, which was one of the, reduces number of birth rates, as was also suggested earlier by some of the speakers. Development reduces population growth, and the way of reducing, sort of helping countries develop in countries of origin is also, again, through remittances, far outstrips overseas development assistance. So we see a direct correlation between migration and development, and we see that securitizing migration and reducing migration only fosters irregular migration and gives more strength to smugglers and traffickers who benefit from that. And maybe one last point is that when we also need to understand that the migrants, how they perceive these journeys, whether we consider them irregular, illegal. IOM does not like the term illegal, because no human being is illegal. But these journeys that are being undertaken are perceived as being done in a wrong way by many of the receiving countries, but actually the countries of origin don't necessarily perceive them the same way. They just see them as a journey from A to B. They have an objective, they need to move from A to B. They don't necessarily see them as irregular journeys, and they don't see them as, they don't see the smugglers as bad persons, but rather as intermediaries. And again, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that as well. So how can we address irregular migration, all the while profiting from our economic, making migration profitable and sustainable for our sustainable development, and protecting migrants themselves and countering the smugglers and traffickers, is making regular pathways a reality, so that people can actually migrate in a safe, orderly, and regular manner, and making sure that their rights are respected, including through ethical recruitment and respecting their rights in countries of destination, as also suggested by some of the speakers today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amran. Same question for you, Sarah.
Thank you very much. So I guess we have had confirmation that migration is indeed a very complex and sensitive topic, and we have heard a very wide range of opinions. And I think that's why I'm not convinced by those saying that it's obvious that citizens in Europe do not want migration, are opposed to migration, want less migration. I think that we've seen that there's a wide range of people representing citizens, and they have expressed a wide range of views. And even if we see in some countries that there is a strengthening of political parties that run on a pro-restriction towards migration, or really on an anti-migration platform, even if, let's say, such a party reaches, let's say, 25% in an election, it still leaves 75% of votes going to other parties. So I'm really not convinced. I don't see any evidence that all citizens are against migration, and therefore it's time for experts to start reflecting that. I firmly believe in evidence-based debates. What there is a lot of disinformation circulating, a lot of disinformation notably on migration, but also on other topics. And we've seen cases, we've seen it here in Dublin, we've seen it in Southport as well in the UK over the summer. Sometimes it leads to unrest. And I think what is actually interesting is to find out who is behind this disinformation, because there might be indeed people doing that internally, but there's also involvement of external hostile countries. And that's a very complex issue again, but I think that even in the case of these riots, these unrest, it was quite limited. Again, it's by no stretch of the imagination representative of what society might be believing, and there were indeed strong counter-protests, as we saw in Southport. So I think we should be very careful and not overstate the case there. So what I think we need really is more evidence-based debates on migration, and I think that starts with more education about migration. And I'm thinking here about schools, for example, making sure that migration is fully part of the curriculum, and notably in history. Because as I said, migration is at the heart of the history of many countries, both in terms of immigration and emigration. And also, as mentioned earlier, there are many opportunities in many countries, and notably here, really very close to here, we have this wonderful museum. It was mentioned earlier, and I would indeed invite you all to visit it. And apart from that, I agree with the points made by my colleague, Mr. Taha. And I won't reiterate that, but I think it is true, nobody wants to see a crisis. Some would say, those are not actually crises, but let's say nobody wants to see a lot of irregular movements and unorganized migration. It's not good for the migrants, it's not good for the asylum seekers, it's not good for the communities where these people are arriving. So we need indeed more legal, safe and organized routes for both migrants and asylum seekers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Let me close and end this discussion with a personal remark. I have been migrant my whole life through. I was born in Germany, but when I was 5 years old, my parents moved to Belgium. And my mother was German and my father was Belgian. He came from Brussels, and we were talking 3 languages at home. And you know it because of your Belgian roots. And I never identified myself as one who has lost, but who has won because of mobility that I had made. So this is a bicultural approach, and we are all benefiting from people like me. Let me underline this. And I've learned today that if I mentioned that there is an internal security approach, that we have to deal with foreign policy and also with social security, there is one more specific point we should underline and stress. This is the economic growth. And as you underlined, Amar, if we don't respect that migration is a gain, is a benefit, we are going backwards. And to all those who are not convinced yet, let's go ahead, let's move further, and I will give you just one example. Yes, of course, we should listen to people, and you mentioned that we also have to listen to facts. And as politicians, as MPs, we always have to listen to people. Yes, we do. And I'm asking all times, what are the main interests of the people in my constituency? And you know, yes, of course, they are worried by security issues. They are worried by migration because they're hurt so much. And you were talking about disinformation. But when you ask them much more, they care much more about healthcare, for instance. And in the hospital of my hometown, 80% of the physicians working there have a migration background. So when I imagine we will all send them home, we will have no healthcare support anymore. So please keep that in mind. So yes, of course, maybe there is a kind of fear, but listen, as you said, to the facts, and let's have yes, a strong debate. And as far as I'm leading the Migration Committee, we have to respect all human lives. But yes, of course, we have, and one of the most important duties that we have is to create more legal and more regular pathways, because migration is needed if we, as you said, don't want to go backwards. Thank you. Please stay curious. Learn some more about the Irish and their migration history, as you said. So it is not far away to go to the epic, and you learn that culture is linked to migration as well. And there is no, you don't have to have any fear that there is a cultural loss, because you will see it there. It's about dancing, it's about music, it's about literature, and we have to learn so much more about ourselves. So let me stop here with my closing remarks, dear colleagues, and this brings us our discussion to an end. However, we will move immediately into the